how's everyone today? I got a little Western action for you. For years in the past, when I would go into used bookstores, and occasionally, I didn't read a lot of Westerns in the past, a lot of paperback Westerns, but I was aware of them. I would see them occasionally. I would frequently come across a series of books about a cowboy hero called Buchanan. They would always have the name Buchanan in the title, Buchanan something something, or Buchanan blah blah blah. And I admit I found them intriguing, interesting. I never read any at the time, nor bought any. Now I wish I had, because recently I finished the first in the series of 23 Buchanan novels, as by Jonas Ward, called The Name's Buchanan. Now, this first novel was written under the house name Jonas Ward, but it was written by a more well-known or associated with mystery fiction, a writer named William Ard, A-R-D, William Ard. He wrote the first 5 or 5+ Buchanan novels, including this one, The Name's Buchanan, and then he sadly passed away, and in the 6th novel was finished, the one he died in the middle of, was finished by science fiction author Robert Silverberg. The series continued. These were written for Gold Medal books, published by Gold Medal Books, probably paperback originals, and they always had some really cool covers, usually featuring Buchanan himself, ready to go. And the first 5 that Ard wrote were The Name's Buchanan, Buchanan Says No, One Man Massacre, Buchanan Gets Mad, and Buchanan's Revenge. And then he was in the middle of writing, or maybe almost finished, I don't know the extent, of Buchanan on the Prod, and then Robert Silverberg came in and finished that. Then a writer named Brian Garfield wrote the next book, Buchanan's Gun. And then the final 16 books in this 23rd book series were written by William R. Cox, under, again, the house name Jonas Ward. From what I gathered online, the best of the Buchanan books are these first 5 ones by William Ard. I think the others are supposed to be good and pleasant reads, but the characters and the kind of more vivid character portraits that you see with the secondary guest characters in these early William Ard novels are supposed to add to some of the scope of the books. They're all quite short, in the 125, 130 range, from what I can tell. Again, the fine folks at Piccadilly Publishing, ebook publishing house, digital publishing house, have struck gold again. Not only have they been putting out the Big Jim and Larry and Stretch series from Leonard B. Mears, as by Marshall Grover, and I've been collecting a lot of those on my Kindle. I have this little Kindle 11th generation Paperwhite, and these books are probably hard, especially the Australian books by Mears are hard to find in paperback format. I'm guessing the Buchanan books are more easily found in the used bookstores, but of course not where I'm at here in Japan. So very glad to get a hold of these for affordable price. And let me just read you the little blurb at the beginning of this ebook that talks about what happened in this first novel, kind of in general. I'll go into more detail in a moment. There's quite a lot happening in a short span of time. So this is about Buchanan. The Name's Buchanan, the first book in the series. Now, for some reason, Piccadilly published these William Ard original Buchanan books at the end of their series. So they say this one's number 18, but no, it's not 18, it's number 1. It was written in 1956. The last Buchanan book was written and published, I should say, in 1986. Over a 30-year span, 23 novels were released. And Buchanan's another really memorable, fun character, a huge, big giant of a man. Think of Clint Walker, a Cheyenne, kind of that size, but he's, of course, a Texan. A lot of these writers love the Texans, the wild Texans. And in this book, he's just spent 2 years kind of as a hired gun for Campos, this kind of Mexican revolutionary soldier, and he's had enough, and it's implied that he's he got his pay of about 5,000 in gold that he's wearing in a belt hidden under his overcoat, and he kind of took a beating when he left, but he also served up as good as he got, and is riding back across the border from Mexico into America. He's really looking forward to getting back to America after a couple of years down there south of the border, and he's looking for a nice relaxed return to his home country, and he comes across one of the nastiest American towns and group of Americans that you could hope to ever meet in the Old West. Anyway, this is a little bit about Buchanan. He was a tall son, taller than most men by a head, with a look of wildness in his battered, tough face. He was Tom Buchanan, out of West Texas, who fought with joy and loved with gusto, who many times had gone to meet death without pause and with great good nature. This time he took on the whole of Agri County and the violent bandit clan that ran it. It was no fight of his, but a girl had been violated and a family's honor tarnished. So Buchanan settled his gun belt and flexed his great hands and went surging into battle like a one-man troop of cavalry. And by God, in the end, there would be nothing even left to burn in Agri Town. Pretty good blurb there. Buchanan, what's interesting about these books, at least as the ones that William Ard wrote, he's quite a good writer, judging by this one. But Buchanan's not a perfect guy. He's not a superhero. He's big, strong, powerful, but he describes himself as kind of a wandering bum, a cowpoke, saddle bum. He doesn't have any pretensions to being, of high stature or anything like that. Doesn't have any big dreams. He's just kind of happy to kind of poke around and do his thing and have a good time. He's very genial and easygoing until pushed. And if you push him, watch out. Okay, so what happens in this one is there is this family. Basically, Buchanan gets in the middle, or basically he's on the Mexican side. But there is a family across the border. This is Agri Town that is mentioned there in the blurb, is in Southern California, across from the Mexican border. California is a pretty new state at this stage. Things are still, I'm guessing it's kind of set in the, probably post-Civil War era time. Obviously, when Mexican Revolution was going on, so I guess we'd be, pushing towards the end of the, the 19th century. But things are still pretty wild down in that area, and right across the border of this town, Agri, is the large Rancho del Rey, that belongs to the Del Cuervo family. They're kind of Spanish-descended aristocratic Mexicans. There's Don Pedro and his wife, Don Isabel. They're very, honorable and formal people, and they have a daughter and a son. Now, the daughter is, I guess, 18. She's extremely beautiful, and the book starts with her horse coming back alone with no rider. The daughter's name is Maria, and the ramrod, the segundo, the second, the kind of head of the ranch under Don Pedro, the top man and an old friend for 40 some years, and servant, I guess you could say, is a man named Gomez, a really tough, stocky Mexican guy, very cool character in this book. He's called Tia Cafe because he's always drinking coffee, and he's kind of Uncle Coffee to Maria and her older brother Ramon. Anyway, he sees this girl's horse without her, and he's very worried, and because she's very beautiful and very young, and he goes out looking for her. Meanwhile, Buchanan, who's just coming across the border, are almost there. He's not quite. He's still in Mexico, and he's on the ranchero land, I guess, or nearby. And he's musing to himself about how he's looking forward to getting back to the States, etc. And he comes across Maria, the girl, lying naked, face down in a river, looking like she's dead. He gets off his horse, pulls her out, gives her kind of, not mouth to mouth, what they knew, probably pumping the arms and squeezing the water out. She coughs out a bunch of water. She's still alive. He clothes her in his ratty old blanket because he's looking pretty rough. He's got His face is all beat up from having a big fight with his former revolutionary compadres. And he's bearded and looks a little wild and hard. But he's got gentle eyes, apparently. Anyway, he wraps her up in a blanket. He could tell that something bad's happened to her, that she's been raped, basically. And he's in the middle of carrying her back to her horse, to his horse, when here comes Gomez with a gun, saying, "What do you do with her, senor?" And then he says, "This girl's had a bad time of it. I had nothing to do with it." And Gomez immediately believes him. He can tell he's that kind of an hombre, you know, a true truth teller, a straight talker. You could tell that this is not that man that's going to do that kind of thing. Buchanan is, you know, sick of Mexico, but he does fondly recall a few friendly senoritas that he knew in a place called San Jacinto. You know, he's not the type that's going to force anything on a woman by any stretch. So they get the girl loaded in a wagon and take her back, and her brother Juan joins them. And as the party is heading back to Rancho del Rey, you know, Buchanan just slips away. He doesn't want to get involved. He slips away and he heads into Agri-town. Now, it turns out that the man who raped and left for dead and clubbed her with a pistol and all this kind of jazz is a real piece of work, a creep called Roy Agri. Buchanan arrives in this town called Agri-town, and everywhere he looks, it's got the name Agri on it, and Agri is this nasty family that runs this town. There is Simon Agri, who's this big, kind of bloated-looking guy that has a kind of gunslinger minder bodyguard named Abe Carbo. And then he has Simon Agri's brother. Lou is the, you know, kind of venal sheriff of the town. There's another kind of less intelligent brother named Amos, who kind of is the butt of, or cousin or something, that's the kind of butt of the two other brothers' bad treatment, etc. And Simon Agri, the guy who runs this town, he has delusions of grandeur. He wants to run for governor of California one of these days, so he's trying to, you know, he's gathering money and trying to big up himself. And he likes to keep his brother Lou down, and they're kind of infighting there. And he's been hiring a bunch of men to guard him, and Lou's been kind of politicking on his side, getting some more deputies and gunslingers, etc. Anyway, everything in this town is expensive. You know, genial, you know, good-natured Buchanan rides in. He just wants to get a drink and a bath and a hotel, and everything's costing him $10, and he's pulling out money out of his money belt and not really being too careful about it, and because he's just happy to be back in America, right? He's an easygoing guy. And he kind of has a little run-in with this Roy Agri, who's really hot-tempered because he feels, as bad as a guy as he is, he does feel, I guess, some gnawings of guilt for what he did to Maria, and a little worried about everything, etc. Anyway, what happens is he gets into it a little bit with Buchanan, but Juan, Maria's brother, finds out who did this. You know, and against his parents' wishes, he gets on his horse, dashes across the border, comes into the saloon, and guns down this Roy Agri rapist prick. And then the deputy and the sheriff come in, and the deputy is this real big, mean SOB called Waldo Peak. And he just starts laying into this Ramon kid and beating the crap out of him. It looks like he's almost going to kill him. And Buchanan is hiding out in his hotel, ready to, you know, with a gun on his lap, ready for someone to come and give him a hard time. He sees this happening. He drops out of the hotel room, comes over and just pow, dislocates this Peak guy's jaw to lay off the kid. But then, of course, Lou, the sheriff, Lou Agri, and a bunch of others come in and, you know, pistol whip him and beat him up, and he ends up in jail with this kid who, then there's a kind of kangaroo court. The kid's sentenced to death by hanging, and Buchanan is basically let go, although they've seized all his money and his gun and his guns and his horse, etc. And kind of acting in a kind of a magnanimous state, Simon Agri says, "All right, you haven't made your case," mostly kind of to needle his brother, who's trying to get trying to lay out a case that in the court in front of this bot jury, basically, that Buchanan was part of this, plan to kill Roy Agri, who's the son of Simon, by the way. But Simon is not the one who's acting as the judge and who runs this town. He's not exactly sad that his son's been killed. It was kind of a problem for him with his wanton, rapist, creepy ways and good-for-nothing self. And he's not really sad about it, but he's looking for a way to profit from him. Anyway, to kind of nettle his brother, he frees Buchanan. And Buchanan says, look, the kid was acting for a reason. And Juan's saying, no, do not shame I don't want to say it. Please, senor, don't say anything. I don't want it known what has happened to my sister, because Maria's about to get married to another aristocratic Mexican guy who wants his bride to be pure. He wouldn't have anything to do with her if he thought she had been violated as that way. So Juan is willing to go to his grave without that being known. Buchanan's like, well, I don't know. And anyway, it turns out they're going to free him, but this Lou Agri, again, angry at his brother. They're both jockeying for position. He wants to not only keep all the money that he stole, this almost $5,000 money belt he got off of Buchanan, but he sends a couple deputies out to take him to the river, supposedly, ostensibly to free him, but he wants them to murder him, to shoot him down. One of the deputies just can't see it through. He kind of likes the way Buchanan has stood up and carried himself. Basically Buchanan ends up free and swings back into action to regain his missing loot and his horse and guns, etc., and also to help this kid who he calls Johnny, this Juan del Cuervo. So all sorts of stuff going on, different factions playing against each other, but Ard really balances all these people really well. Buchanan's a main character, but there's lots of, it is his series for sure, and he would go on to probably have more of a center stage role to play in future novels. But in these William Ard early ones, written as Jonas Ward, he's trying to create more of a vivid picture of all the different characters. And there are a lot of characters, but they're all interesting and they all stand out. Now, Gomez is a really cool character. Juan becomes a pretty cool character. Maria, we get more into Maria's head later. This is really fun as things work out that towards the end of the book. And there's even a really interesting bit where this Abe Carbo, who's like this, very veteran gunslinging killer, who's murdered many a man and has worked for many different kind of wealthy guys as their hired gun. And he's kind of has plans for Agrietown himself, and he's working for this Simon guy only as long as he can stomach it, and then he's planning to take all the money he can. And we get a little glimpse into his mind of how he's kind of daydreaming about how, he could run this whole town if he had just this Buchanan guy working for him. He's not even seen Buchanan really do much, but he can just tell by the way he carries himself. This Buchanan guy knows what he's doing. He knows his way around violence and a gun. And if just Buchanan and we could run this whole town. He's smirking to himself thinking about this. It's really, really amusing sort of side story that a lot of these characters have. The action all comes to a big head, and things happen after that, and it's a lot of fun. There's some really fun passages. There's a little kind of romance thrown in there between Buchanan and a servant girl, a maid at the Rancho del Rey named Lolita, who they take to each other right away. But Buchanan is offered, when he's helping these people, he's offered lots of things in return to stay and various things like that. But he's a wandering guy, as he calls him, and a term that I never read before, a ramstam. He calls himself a ramstam. I guess that means like a rambler. Anyway, got to move on to the next Buchanan book for the next adventure. Anyway, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this book. It was well written. It was, gritty and hardcore in some parts. Nowhere near like a rough, tough, brutal, sadistic Edge kind of book. But it also didn't gloss over death and rough handling. And, Buchanan takes several beatings before he ends up dishing a bunch out, mainly because he's way outnumbered. He's not a Superman, but he's a tough hombre and plain spoken, honest, and ready to rumble if it's necessary. I had a lot of fun reading this book, and I will read more. I got the ebooks, all of the 5 that William Ard wrote, the first 5. So I have the Buchanan Says No, One Man Massacre, Buchanan Gets Mad, and Buchanan's Revenge. Those are the 5 that William Ard wrote. And I got some of the other later ones too to try them out because the price was so cheap. And I'd like to keep going in the series. So I like this one so much, I'm probably ready to jump right into another one. Anyway, that's a little bit of my recent Westerns reading. I know not everyone likes Westerns, but if you like Westerns and haven't read one of the Buchanan series, I do recommend them, and maybe start with the beginning ones. One last note, this first one, the name's Buchanan, was adapted into a film called Buchanan Rides Alone, starring Randolph Scott in the late 50s, I think. It was one of the, what they call the renowned Westerns. Randolph Scott and his partner Harry Brown, renowned, so they produced many Westerns. Randolph Scott was a really successful Western actor back, well, all the way back in the 30s, but especially in the 50s and early 60s before he retired. He made a lot of really good movies. Many of these famous ones directed by Bud Boetticher. Bud Boetticher was a really excellent kind of, some people say he's a B-level director or he made B movies, but if he did make B movies, they were A-level skill anyway. And he made several ones with Randolph Scott, including The Tall T and 7 Men From Now and Ride Lonesome and Comanche Station. Really excellent Westerns. And this is one of the ones he made. I've seen this. I own it on Blu-ray and DVD. I've seen Buchanan Rides Alone. It's been a long time. I wasn't overly struck with it when I first watched it compared to some of the other Bud Boetticher, Randolph Scott Westerns. I remember it being pretty good. Randolph Scott is an excellent Western actor, but he doesn't fit my image of Buchanan as described in these books. You know, Randolph Scott was tall and well made, but he was very lean. And I think the impression I get from the book is Buchanan's huge with big, huge hands. You know, it's kind of like in the Jack Reacher character. You know, Tom Cruise played Jack Reacher in a couple movies. The first one is excellent. Tom Cruise does a good job. You know, he's very good at getting that kind of rougher, tougher, street fighting sort of version of his usual kind of action man character. And, you know, he does a really creditable job as Reacher, but the Reacher of the books is described as a giant with fists the size of Christmas hams, you know. I'm sorry, Tom Cruise doesn't fit that. He's about my size, right, which is not so huge. So when they cast Alan Ritchson as Reacher for the Amazon Prime series, which has had 3 seasons so far with the 4th on the way, adapting the books, you look at a big guy like Alan Ritchson, who's maybe not quite as big as the book describes Reacher, but he's pretty damn big, close enough. He's really believable. So when you see him, you know, Buchanan Rides Alone, Randolph Scott plays the character in the kind of amiable, genial sort of fashion that is described in the books. And so he does a pretty good job capturing the spirit of the character, but he's just not big enough. He's not as much big of a presence in that physical way as the book describes. So I'm going to watch that film again to see, and after having read one of these Buchanan books, just to see if my take on it is a little bit more positive this time. It wasn't negative. It was a good movie. I felt that Buchanan's character in the movie was kind of sidelined. Even then, when I first watched it decades ago, I knew of this series of Buchanan books. And when I head back to the States this summer, and I get my grubby hands on some used books and troll through some used bookstores once again, I'm going to be keeping an eagle eye out for more of these Buchanan books to kind of get my own physical versions of these in the cool old paperbacks. So that's all for now. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying what you're reading. I will talk to you real soon. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you again.